What's up, tankers? It's Taugrim. This is episode 18 of the Road to Unicum videos, and today we look at the American heavy, the T29. On tanks.gg we can admire this incredible turret. It's basically impenetrable from a frontal facing, with the exception of the turret roof, that green sliver on top, which is very low armor, and then the cupola, the hatch on top of the turret. But for the most part, from range, tanks that are trying to fire at you are going to have a hard time landing shots, especially if you're wiggling your turret or moving back and forth. The hull itself is pretty unremarkable. You can see it has relatively low armor values and this machine gun port. Even if you angle the hull to try to boost the frontal hull armor values, you have to be careful because the side of the tank is relatively soft and you can get penetrated through your drive wheel. The side of the turret is also pretty vulnerable, so you want to be careful about your position. I mean, really, that applies to any tank. You just don't want to get flanked. On this map from the south spawn, if you decide to head west, in my opinion, it's a very good idea to cross over and head west, south of the road. So you can see the KV-85 and the Pershing are running up along the road. And they get away with it in this battle, but in a lot of higher tier battles, especially tier 8 to tier 10, if there are any light tanks or fast mediums on their side, they'll move up to around E3 and spot the approach that we have towards city, and our tanks would take a lot of unnecessary damage. So I tend to stay south of the road. Right now the only thing that I'm exposing, even if I'm spotted, is my turret, so even if they do have a shot at me, they're not likely to penetrate. I get a nice snapshot on that E2, and I wasn't expecting it to land, but you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, and ammo costs are relatively cheap, and I'm rewarded with that damaging shot. So aside from the strong turret, what makes this tank really work is the awesome gun depression of minus 10 degrees. So you can aim down on other tanks when you're facing ridges such as this. You don't have to expose your hull armor, which is really important since it's so soft. And this IS-2 is having to come up. That tank doesn't have particularly good gun depression, so he's overexposing himself trying to get a shot, and our team makes him pay for it. I also really appreciate the gun handling for the American heavy line. It's pretty good for heavy tanks, especially in comparison to the Soviet tanks. And this T-32 here, there's only a sliver of his upper front glacis exposed, and his tank is slightly leaning back, so that's a pretty sharp angle, pretty much an auto bounce. But the T-32 pushes up a little bit here. Now more of his upper hull is exposed, and that's a relatively easy penetration for this gun, which has really good silver penetration of 198 for a tier 7 gun, and very acceptable alpha of 320. Now, the place I was when I shot the IS-2 earlier was not arty safe. That's where the Pershing has been hanging out, that's like on the open area along the building. I always assume that arty is on my side, and so what you can do, you see the shadow of this tower in front of me, you can hang out around this tower. If arty is firing on you, it offers pretty good protection. KV-5 misses, and during his reload I move up and finish off the IS-2. And even though the KV-5 is a tier up from me, what I can do with the great gun depression is move up here. All he's looking at is my turret, and because I'm above him, it's actually hard for him to hit my turret roof. It's a pretty narrow angle, and his gun is not particularly accurate. The T-32 pushes up pretty aggressively. I put a shell on the side of his tank, and then he rushes his shot here in a moment. So he just fired, and this allows me to kind of leisurely move up during his reload, punch him through his drive wheel, and track him. Our Pershing, I assumed he was going to finish off the T-32, but he misses a pair of kill shots. So I push up here and finish off the T-32. Normally, I'd have to be very careful about moving where I am right now, because if they've got tanks that are sniping from E3 and D3, I would take fire from them if I move into this open area. Now the IS-3 has come around the backside of this tower. Our T-28 prot is keeping their KV-13 and KV-5 stuck, right? Because they can't shoot anywhere on him except for his hull, except for his turret, because he's hull down. And so that lets me flex over and try to get a kill shot on the IS-3. I don't get the shot, but the point remains I'm able to flex because the T-28 has locked down that lower road area. So with a good gun depression and strong turret, this really is a very comfortable tank to play, and it's not a fast tank, but the mobility is acceptable. It's not, well, I should say the speed is acceptable. It's not particularly agile, but it is kind of a large tank. I mean, you can see the profile And you do have to be careful because on some maps you'll get punished by arty. So, as an example, if you're in the middle of the map on Prokhorovka and there's arty on the map, you'll be a prime target because you're a pretty big tank. Here I misjudged the speed of the KV-13. This is pretty sloppy on my part, but we've got him totally outnumbered, so it's not a big deal. And then during my reload, I go ahead and do the good discipline thing of making sure to angle my hull at about 30 degrees in case he decides to fire at me. He's not. Let me finish him off. This tank, the T29, it has a stellar reputation, and I played for a long time without unlocking this tank, and so I knew coming in it was going to be a good tank, but it even outperformed my high expectations. I was, averaging around 1900 damage with it, and that even exceeded the numbers that I put up with the IS-7, which I played just a couple months ago. And at the time, I thought the IS-7 was the strongest Tier 7 tank that I'd played because it has, it packs super punch and is a good brawler and has pretty good armor and good speed. And the T29, even though it has, lower alpha and a weaker hull, because of the gun depression and the strong turret, you can more comfortably leverage terrain and crest fight, compared to the Soviet heavies. And it is a bit of a preference thing. I found that every tank in the E5 line, from the Tier 5, T1 heavy, all the way up to the Tier 10, T110 E5, was very comfortable to play because those tanks all have good gun depression and reasonably good gun handling. The next tier up is the tank we're going to look at, the T32, and unfortunately it uses the same gun, so while the T29 has good silver penetration for its tier of 198, very good penetration, that really is not so good for a tier 8 tank, but we're able to make it work, or at least I was able to make it work acceptably as long as I was careful about positioning and where I aimed. So I pick up an Ace Tinker Mastery badge here, dealt over 4,000 damage and got 4 kills, and I'm going to progress through, cover the T32 next, and I'm going to show you a battle where I basically help to lock down 3 to 4 tanks at a time and just bully them with my strong turret, and then we'll look at the M103 and the E5 after that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.